Good morning, everybody. John Sfiocchi here for GAI Insights, bringing you the Gen AI news briefing, rating your top news essential, important, or optional. We have Kevin Petrie from Bark. We have Adam Rappaport, tech wizard and AI analyst, and from Down Under, Paul Beyer and Ankaj Handa. We have some interesting things today, everything from how to build new language models using molecules to new kinds of RAG assessment. All right, Ankaj, we can start in, please.
Sure, John. So the first one that we have for today comes from Microsoft Research, and it talks about BenchmarkQED, which is an automated benchmarking of RAG systems.
Yeah, very interesting new tool from our friends at Microsoft. What do you think here, Adam?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I thought this was an important article. I hadn't really considered the extent to which benchmarking your RAG systems is really going to continue to become a more and more relevant and important part of enterprise. So there's the idea of RAG, which is where you have some documents and you're asking the model questions about the information. But what we've noticed is there's limitations in that because it doesn't have sort of the map of the semantics around that information. And that's what they call the graph RAG. So with graph RAG, this is a framework and it's from Microsoft. So it has some teeth to it, and that in it itself probably makes it worthwhile, but it looks like a fairly useful system. It has three components: one that can prepare and sample data sets for benchmarking on whatever system you're trying to test. Then the auto queue, which actually makes the questions across the different types of data to test the system. And then auto E, which is the actual evaluation framework itself, which uses GPT as a judge, and sort of comes up with the overall metrics, and it does it on some really interesting qualitative evaluation metrics, which is comprehensiveness. How much did it address all of the actual questions? The diversity, did it actually present all of the perspectives that were within that information? How much did it help the reader understand and make informed judgments? So the empowerment of the response, as well as the relevance and whether it actually addressed the specific question. So it's a really unique approach that's qualitative, but still provides, in some ways, a quantitative way to automate the benchmarking of your graph RAG, and it's from Microsoft. So it's a long way of saying I think it's important to be aware of.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, all kinds of new like meta capability, like asking it to characterize the nature of the database. And obviously the RAG stuff is much more micro in terms of it doesn't have the meta context really, but this provides it, which I think is super important when you're doing data analysis. What do you think here, Kevin?
Very interesting article. Critical activity. A lot of organizations need to make sure their RAG workflows deliver what's required. I like the parameters that they have. I guess a couple observations I'd have about RAG in general is I think that the most effective ones will often be hybrid. They'll have multiple approaches. There's vector RAG, which helps you represent the semantic meaning of text, for example. And then there's graph RAG, which will help you, as Adam was saying, explain the interrelationships or convey ontologies, relationships between different entities. There's also relational RAG, which you're pulling things from databases, trusted facts, and those things can all enrich each other. So I think it's important to be able to benchmark RAG approaches that include all three types. And you'll also want to be able to do it in heterogeneous environments that include non-Microsoft platforms and sources and so forth. That's where I wasn't entirely clear, and I had a little trouble downloading the article, whether this is all just for Microsoft environments or whether this could apply to heterogeneous environments, other types of databases and so forth. Regardless, I do think it's an important article to read.
Yeah, what's your sense, from Ankaj or Adam, Paul? Does this go across environments, not just to Microsoft environments? I thought it did, but I can't think of it explicitly saying so.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Microsoft is providing a framework, but it's definitely technology agnostic. Oh. It's more about what's in the cloud and what's on-prem and what's closer to the core and what's closer to the edge.
So, Paul, going for important here?
I had it as a product announcement. I mean, it's an important topic. It's a product announcement of the thing here. So I was more on the optional side, but Maybe outvoted, but it's a product announcement.
Pankaj, what do you say?
Definitely important, John.
All right, Paul, you have been subdued by the
Paul,
mob.
Paul, just on that, I think it's an open source framework. I don't think they're really trying to
Push product.
get a product out of this per se.
Yeah. All right. Important it is.
Pushing open source. Is that what you're saying, Adam?
Well, no.
You're not suspicious of Microsoft giving open source software away?
No, I think the model's clear.
Yes, they're not today's villain. They were yesterday's villain. All right, next.
The next one comes from AWS, and it's a case study about how Nudi is enhancing diagnostic flow with LLM and Amazon Bedrock agent integration.
Yeah, we have Nudie here. They've got, 1,000+ EV charging stations. They're getting, information, straight from the cloud. I think it's doing pricing optimization, although it didn't have any numbers on that. What do you think here, Kevin?
Another great, fascinating read from AWS, meaty technical case study with intuitive diagrams that shows step-by-step how this process is working. I think it's a use case that could apply to a number of different sectors. This is specific, as you said, to pricing optimization for EV charging stations. I think it's an important article. One thing that tripped me up was I'm not sure why Gen AI is necessarily required for this. Ultimately, this is the type of use case that I think traditional machine learning could take care of pretty easily. Most or all of the inputs look to me to be structured or semi-structured, and I think it's somewhat of a traditional use case about pinpointing a number or range of numbers that are going to maximize profits in this case. So, great if you've got a Gen AI chatbot that's wrapping words around the outputs, but I wasn't entirely sure why it was Gen AI, other than the fact that Gen AI is sexy compared to more traditional machine learning. Regardless, I think it's an important article to read, and I think it's another good example of what you can do to put AI to work, and it does have some description of the business results as well at the end, which is critical.
All right, Kevin's headed for important. Adam, I know you were optional on the pregame.
Yeah, I could support Kevin's assessment. I was leaning towards optional. The only thing it says is one sentence in the summary at the end that the approaches deliver 15% increase in revenue and reduced implementation time by 10%. I would have liked to see more detail about exactly how that was done within this.
Yeah,
but it does give good detail, and you make a great point, Kevin. At this diagram here, you see those two green boxes in the bottom right, AWS Bedrock, right? That's the only LLMs they're using, and honestly, to translate or to do that pricing, as you're saying, it's fairly deterministic. It wasn't probably necessarily needed, but it does translate cross-industry fairly well. So I could support important, but I was leaning towards optional.
Okay.
Paul?
Optional.
Pankaj?
I was between optional and important, John. I think Kevin and Adam make some pretty interesting points, so important for me.
Yeah, I'm going to give it an important. I was on optional before, but you pointed out there is at least some, assessment of economic value here. Luda's coming in with an optional. Sorry, Luda, no vote today. Doesn't count for me.
No, I was saying it didn't do much of an assessment. Kevin was arguing for the important. I was with Luda.
Yeah. I'm going to give it an important. It's a nice, case on a, different kind of environment, not just a software environment. We get these EV charging stations. So let's give it important.
John, Luda's in the audience, but it's cute how she still thinks she can influence it to talk. So I think the charade that we're all doing here is need to keep going.
I'm impressed she's dialing in on a day off.
There you go.
Well, they're addicted. Everyone's addicted.
There you go. Next.
Okay. Yes. The next one comes from Morgan Stanley and talks about how they are tackling one of coding's toughest problems.
Yeah, I was on this one. It's an incredibly important area. Morgan Stanley, obviously, big name company, but it's as they say, fluffy, not stuffy. You know, there's nothing in here. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's a puff piece. It doesn't give any details in terms of, you know, the economic value. The issue, I think it's cool that Morgan Stanley had the courage to go ahead and build their own model to do COBOL refactoring. And I just think it points to how incredibly productive it is to use these things, that they would bother to build their own software to do it, or train their own model anyway. I mean, not sorry, they tuned a model. I don't think they trained it, you know, off the shelf. So I would say optional. Part of it's due to my disappointment. If you would just say a little bit about, you know, what the heck it did in terms of economic value, or what kind of, you know,
John,
this whole.
It does say it saved 280,000 developer hours.
Yeah, that's true. It does say that, but
that's
that
just
for me-
because it's doing the summarization, and they're just calculating how long it would take for the. Yeah, I mean, it helped with a ton of technical debt, right? That's basically what they've calculated.
Yeah, but I would love to see. I mean, is it changing the ratio of maintenance debt to innovation, or, you know, is it taking the total IT budget up, down, or sideways? I don't know. I just, but fair enough, Paul. It does have that in there. So I don't know. Maybe I'll go toward important, but I was kind of anchored on optional, but I could be talked out of it. What do you think here, Kevin?
I agree. I think optional, big topic, big trend, big opportunity. The demographics are compelling. As we know, mainframers and folks familiar with those older types of code that are locking up data within iSeries and mainframe and vSAM and other systems.
Yeah.
That's a big issue, trying to figure out how to refactor that stuff. But this particular article is quite light on detail. So I think optional.
All right, Paul, I feel that you're going to come in a little higher.
Yeah, I was definitely higher. I mean, I was putting $250 an hour times 280,000. That's 70 million. This is an article. It's in Wall Street Journal. I think we talk a lot about the role of the AI leader, that they need to forward articles for other leaders at their company that are particularly relevant and help them understanding where the boundary condition keeps moving. And this falls into that. So I was more on the essential side.
Okay, so for you, fluffy, not stuffy is the feature, right? It's easily consumed.
No, $70 million is not fluffy. $70 million and covered in the Wall Street Journal. It means anybody in my legacy better be looking at this. And CIO to say that you're and the compliance to say this is not secure and this is not mainstream is a non sequitur.
Yeah, fair enough. Morgan Stanley does have that credibility. What do you say, Ankash? We're screaming from optional all the way up to.
We do have a lot of essentials this week here, so that's a big against.
John, I think we have covered a few articles similar to this previously as well. I think the difference here is the earlier set of articles mentioned that they are converting the Cobalt code directly into Python, but here they make an important exception where they are saying that they are getting the code in English language or mapping the code and then transferring it to the other sort of modern coding languages.
Yeah, I don't know.
John, may I? You haven't asked me yet.
I'm not interested. Okay.
All right, fair.
Go for it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the time. There isn't a tool out there right now in terms of an LLM's capabilities to do, as Ankaj is saying, more than they accomplish here. They're like, oh, you can't just go from this really legacy code to some modern code because it can't really figure out how to do it any better, and it's just trying to copy it. And they built their own model to try and solve this problem, and they only get themselves halfway there by translating it into like common English to describe what the code is doing. I can't imagine there's an LLM out there that's not state of the art that can't do that right now. Like they're all going to do it quite well. And I feel like maybe they spent 2 years building something that a year ago would have been amazing. But I'm thoroughly unimpressed, Paul. You can make up a big number by saying, look, it did all of this work that we would have had to have people do for us. But that's like saying, well, you know, we're gonna have it lay down half of the tracks across the country. And look at all that time and money it saved. And it's like, well, why didn't you just do it the other way and build the whole railroad? Like, I don't know.
And Adam, so you're making the case this might be like Bloomberg that spent $10 million in own large language model, and GPT-4 came out.
Yeah, this is like as Ankash was saying, we've already covered articles. Like they're only getting the code from the old version to some English so that then a developer can go manually write the new code. Well, we're already looking at examples of people taking that old code and having an LM just put it straight into the Python. So I think they've really missed the mark here, and they shouldn't have been publishing this. Frankly, it would be embarrassing.
All right. Well, this is a hard one. All right. So we got essential on one end, optional on the other. Might be promoting what looks like an advance for the naive, but to the sophisticated, it's actually a mistake. Okay. I'm gonna have to go optional on this one. Optional it is. All right.
Okay, the next one that we have for today is a research paper which talks about coding agents with multimodal browsing are generalist problem solvers.
Yeah, I mean, this thing, this brought me back a little bit. Back when I was a doctoral student, the thing that the folks at Carnegie Mellon were trying to do with symbolic AI was called GPS, a general problem solver. So there we go. What do you think, Adam?
It's interesting research. I think it's one because it is just research and wouldn't really impact the AI executive day to day. I probably would have been optional anyway. And I think it's on page 4, Ankaj. They really pad the numbers around the performance in their benchmarks. And I don't think, or maybe it's even further down, maybe 6. There's a chart where it shows them and many of the other, that one there. Sort of how they've performed there on the bottom row there, Open Hands Versa with Claude Sonnet 4, right, on Gaia, which is a generalist agent benchmark, the SWE bench, which is the software engineering. So part of what they're touting also is that because it's a generalist model, so they tried to build a model basically that had as few tools as possible, but could just reason with them really well. So it can do code editing, web search, multimodal browsing, and file access, and that's it. And they're like, with just these 4 things, we can build a model that outperforms all these other specialist models in their areas. But notice none of the other ones are using Claude Sonnet 4 in their benchmark. Like, they're saying our thing with the smartest state-of-the-art engine on the market can outperform all of these other ones with slower engines in them. So it's kind of off the mark there. Interesting, but still research. So I thought it would be optional for the leader.
All right, we're headed for optional on this one. What do you think, Kevin?
I think optional as well. I think Adam summarized this one quite well.
All righty, Ankaj.
Optional, John, I think.
Paul?
Optional.
All right, Luda? No. All right, optional it is.
That's tease, John.
Okay,
Ankaj,
moving on to the next one. Yes, John. So the next one talks about Ether Zero, which is a scientific reasoning model for chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, interesting company here, Future, whatever.
Yeah.
They talk about actually coming to work and building an organization really around the model around the organization. What do you think, Kevin?
Very interesting. And so the premise that they explore here is, can you take a general model, in this case Mistral, I think Mistral 24B, and through reinforcement learning, fine tune it on a specific domain, in this case chemistry, and so they explore how they do that, and then they explore the results that they get, and they're very honest about some of the shortcomings. They'll say, well, it's not good at information recall. It's very good at building molecules. They're talking about the pros and cons of this reasoning model. It's open weight, so people can start to dig in and experiment something with themselves. So I think it's an interesting case study in ways in which you could take a generalist model and start to, through reinforcement learning, approach a specific domain. In the end, the relevance is probably much more focused on chemistry and the overall sciences realm than anything else. You can't necessarily make a lot of conclusions about how this applies to other sectors. So ultimately, I'd say it's optional. If you're in the sciences field and you're looking at Gen AI for chemistry or other things, maybe it's more on the essential or important side. I think generally for the AI reader, it's probably more optional.
All right, Adam, I know you and I were going back and forth in the pregame here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin pretty much just echoed what I was saying to you beforehand. So I'm pretty much right there. I think there is an argument to be made, perhaps importantly, in terms of the idea of fine tuning these models, and certainly this thing, as you were talking about, John, the fact that it literally started to in the fine tuning lose its ability to speak with language, with words, is a pretty fascinating study. But I think this is the last thing the AI leader needs to be reading about right now when they have enough trouble trying to figure out whether hallucinations are being grounded, right? Like they just have far bigger things to be putting their attention on, was my overall assessment.
I might also just add real quick that one of the big questions about fine tuning versus RAG, or simply putting a lot into the prompt window, is the cost, the computational cost, and the level of expertise required. And they don't really talk about those trade-offs, which is sort of another limitation of the article. It could have been that this is a hugely expensive endeavor that most companies cannot afford.
Yeah, they do talk a little bit about it in the video.
Okay, I didn't hit the video.
Yeah, which is super efficient. All right, I'm betting $20. Paul's optional on this. Akash, where are you?
Optional, John. Not useful right now for our AI leader.
All right, let me make the case for essential.
There we
go. When you think about what, first of all, if you listen to and you have to listen to the video, I think to get any interest in that. Just about 4 minutes into the video, they talk about how the model stops reasoning in language and starts making up language for certain kinds of activities, and then also is incredibly good at small molecule creation and projection. And small molecules, as you know, is the central part of most drug development. And so the advancement of science here, and they talk about how the organization and how they work with, they're an organization that's interacting with this model on a regular basis. And when it comes to small model creation, they're incredibly efficient. They have the thing, they can train it with about 15,000 instances, and it outperforms the broad models. And the reason I'd make the case for essential is this is the first instance I've seen of two things that are vital. One is what happens to models when we start training them on non-linguistic data that's still functional data like chemistry. And the second thing is this is the first one I've seen that the small models really dramatically and much more efficiently, orders of magnitude more efficiently, outperform the large models in a well-defined area. And I guess I'd add a third thing, which is the advancement of science is going to drive so much of the economic value out of these things, and not enough people are paying attention to it. So anyway, for me, this is totally mind-blowing in terms of both what kind of organizational form it is, how you think about running an organization like this, and then the efficiency of the model in the context that has the potential to create enormous economic value through science. But anyway, I think I'm getting swamped by the mob here. How about important? Important?
I could go up to important. That was a strong case.
Okay.
It still seems hard to apply it to other sectors more broadly, but those are interesting breakthroughs that you're talking about.
This is where I need Luda. Luda, your vote counts now. Come on, you're a science-based person. Okay. All right, we're going to go for important on this one. But I think it's absolutely mind-blowing if you listen.
John, I mean, I was just thinking of the Microsoft 5.4 models and like some of the stuff we've seen around 4 billion parameter models being fine-tuned to really perform at state-of-the-art levels within a specific vertical within manufacturing or something. So that in itself, with a 24 billion parameter, I think more what's unique is the way they've done that with the special sauce with the chemistry. Than the fact that that concept alone that you're saying is so important, which I think we've highlighted enough before. That
Adam, I'm forgetting which of those models is it?
5.4 from Microsoft. It's an open source model, 4 billion parameter from Microsoft. They're gonna go put them on the NVIDIA, microservices.
All right, here we have Luda's thinking on this thing, but here's the bad news: only important. All right. Important it is. Akash, if you give us the tote board, and then Paul, what are we doing on Monday for the Learning Lab?
Monday we've got another great session on the SEO bloodbath.
I'm sorry, we're not done yet. I'm sorry, my apologies. We have one more. Akash, go ahead.
Yes. So the last one that we have for today comes from BNP Paribas, and they are providing their business with an LLM as a service platform to accelerate the industrialization of Gen AI use cases.
Yes, yeah, and I was on this one as well. This is something we've been predicting for some time, that there'd be a layer above the models, and that these. It's interesting to see that a bunch of the banks, right? Morgan Stanley's done this, Goldman Sachs. I don't know about Morgan Stanley. JP Morgan has done this, Goldman Sachs, and so forth. And so, the notion of creating security and intermodal layer and models as a service, I think we're seeing here. I didn't see a lot of economics or real impact on the organization. So, as interesting as the domain is, I don't think there's a lot of new news here, and certainly not a lot of detail. So I was going to give it an optional. But what do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I think optional as well. I like the notion of LLM as a service. A lot of the hard work now centers on application development. What do you do with these models? How do you put them to work and build workflows for users? So it's a step in that direction, but ultimately this is more of a product announcement.
Adam?
Yeah, agreed. This is, I feel, really Mistral trying to show how people are running locally, but it solves none of the business challenges, whether you're connecting to an API to Anthropic or running Mistral locally. What you do with it now that you have this LLM is really as Kevin was alluding to, the challenges that are confronting them. So this is really just a showcase of, hey, look, yeah, you can run your models locally and provide that internally as a service, but it's not doing much, I felt, beyond that.
Okay, Ankash?
Optional, John. They haven't given any metrics to support this.
All right, and I don't think we're going to get from Mr. Buyer. What do you think?
Optional.
There you go. All right, we're done with those. Ankash is going to give us the tote board. Paul, Monday.
Monday Learning Lab, a continued conversation that's really important on the SEO bloodbath. So Rosemary and Mike from Revere are going to be giving an update on what's really happening with this massive change from search engines, Google, to answer engines, where we think 15 to 20%. I was yesterday at a presentation for a PR firm here that had 10 of their clients, top clients, and the marketers are now waking up to this. So this has now become a mainstream issue for marketing, and people need to understand the radical change that's going on for product discovery, company discovery, and evaluation. So join us 7 o'clock on Monday.
Yeah, and people should remember the scope of this. The entire consumer internet is supported by the $600 billion of nonlinear advertising that flows through these platforms, and that's what's getting rerouted here. So this is a Mississippi of money that's now getting moved, and it's going to make a big deal in terms of what's going on.
And Jeff, we've talked to companies that are getting 30 to 40% of all their new leads come from SEO, and they aren't understanding that they've gotten sloppy in this monopolistic SEO world from Google, and radical change is going.
Yeah, and just the whole way you think about your content, your presence. As our friend Pete Blackshaw talks about, your brand is a smoothie, right? It's people get information from many different places, and the ingredients of that smoothie are now changing as we go from the question engines to the answer engines. All right, Kevin, thanks so much. Adam, great to see you.
Thank
Paul, as always. Ankash has left us, but all right, thanks everybody. See y'all on Monday morning early, and then plan for if you're interested in the SEO bloodbath, please plan to join us that evening. Bye-bye now.
All right, thanks all.